Well, our first guest on today's Big Blend Radio show is educator and author Evelyn-LaTorre, and she is joining us to talk about her brand new memoir. It's called Between-Inca-Walls, and it takes you on a journey across international borders and social barriers, and she documents her time in Peru with the Peace Corps and a little bit of Mexico along the way. And she also finds a little bit of love and romance. I think she likes Latin America and Mexico and, South America.
Ooh la la.
So, I know. So the book is out now, Between Inca Walls. It is out now through She Writes Press, and you can get on Amazon, all those great places. Do ask your independent bookstore to get it, too, if it's not there already. You can also go to her website, Evelyn-LaTorre.com. That's Latorre, Evelyn-LaTorre.com. So welcome, Evelyn. How are you doing?
Oh, fine. You take me back. I've been to like 48 of the 50 states, and I've been to Louisiana, so I'm sorry that I didn't get to hear the report there, but eventually I guess she'll be on, right?
Yes, absolutely. We cover Natchitoches and, the whole no man's land, the historic area. We cover that quite a bit, like all the time, and we were just there at the end of July. So, we've got a lot of friends there from our trips over, and definitely Carrie, Carrie, the park manager over at Fort Jessup, man, she knows her history. Man, she really knows her history. And so definitely we'll have her back as soon as the lights go back on for her and that region of Louisiana. So, yeah, so you've been to 48 states. What are the two that you haven't been to yet?
Rhode Island and Iowa.
Oh wow. Huh. We haven't been there either.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's surprising.
No, we haven't been there yet. But no, I think
we'll get there.
We will get there. Yeah, we are pretty much at the northest part of the country that we've ever been to. Today, Fenton, Michigan, Pennsylvania. That will be even. Yeah. This year we didn't expect to be. We kind of had a few detours with COVID. Little travel detours, like suddenly, no, you're not going. You have to turn around. And so it's been a very interesting kind of experience, which you as a world traveler know all about. And just even the beginning of your memoir, you talk about your first trip, a young girl going with all these other young ladies going over the border into Mexico to build a library, right? And getting twirled around in Tijuana. Yeah.
Yes, I had been part of a group out of an organization I went to Holy Names College, an all-women's college, but I hooked up with a group from Newman Center at University of California, Berkeley, and there was a priest there, Father Oluni, who was, for many years, I was one of the first, I think I was in the first group that went down, but they continued going down for about 8 or 9 years after me. Hundreds have gone down to small communities in Mexico that wanted our assistance. And in this instance, there was a warehouse that the Catholic Church had and there was a small town outside of Apaseo El Grande that needed a school. And so we went down and outfitted the school. We had teachers among us, and they set up the curriculum, but I helped lay bricks in the backyard for the patio, and we did some health education and a lot of whatever the people wanted us to do. And then we worked with young people our age. This is when I was between my junior and senior years of college. And before that, I had gone to the Central Valley in California and taken a migrant census among the migrant workers with Cesar Chavez. So that's how I ended up in Peru. There was a young man that used to go down on weekends to take the census with the migrant workers. And one weekend I went down and he wasn't there. I had kind of a crush on him. I did get crushes on American guys once in a while, I have to say. She likes, she's hot-blooded, I'm just saying. She likes hot-blooded men too. Well, they didn't last as long as the ones with the Latin guys, but he played the guitar and probably sang songs in Spanish. But he wasn't there one weekend. And so I said to the priest that was there, I said, well, where's Tom? And he said, oh, Tom joined the Peace Corps and is in Peru. So when the application came asking me, what country I wanted to go to, I put down Peru. I didn't know that much about it at that. point. And then I did meet Tom when I went down there one of the first few days, and I hadn't changed my money, and we went out to lunch, and I couldn't pay for my lunch, and there was a rule with Peace Corps people, you pay your own way. And so that didn't start off well. And then his hair had curled up because he was stationed on the coast, and it's humid there. And that was the end of Tom.
Oh, my gosh.
I went back to my...
No, this is classic. Nancy, didn't your sister do the same thing to one of her husbands? Like, that's it, you cut your hair, that's it, we're out.
He had this huge long beard, and his redhead, and his beard was red and curly, really curly, and he looked like one of those people with the long beard, like the Amish sometimes do, like the long beards, right? And then also one day she's like, I can't stand the beard. Either cut it off or don't, or I'm leaving. And then he did, and then she goes, no, I'm really leaving. Because without the beard, then she was like, oh, you don't even have a chin.
It's a little superficial, but
it's like, hello. It's like, let's talk about the character of a person. No, we're just going to look at the hair. Like,
no, that's it. I did a lot of that. Yeah, just kind of like, no, that's it. We're done. We're done. I think a relationship lasted like a month or something, and I was like, that's it. We're done. One little thing. That's it. You're out. It happens, but it's interesting. You going to Peru and getting involved in the Peace Corps because this was the beginning of the Peace Corps, right? It's something was kind of was new.
Started in 1961, and the years I was there, I was there 64 to 66, and in 1966 there were 15,700 volunteers in I think 141 countries. I mean, it grew fast under Sergeant Shriver and some of the other people that were in charge of it, and they really had sent a lot of volunteers to Peru. And I was lucky in that I got sent. I started off with a group, I can't even remember now, but it says in the book, I think it was 112, and we ended up with 72 that actually made it to Peru because I explain in the book the reasons why they get deselected, it's called. And you have to meet with a psychiatrist, and they ask you about your father and all kinds of things like that. And but anyway, I got through that partly, I think, because I was raised in a small town in southeastern Montana, and I worked on ranches from the time I was 11 years old to 14 or 16, actually, when we came to California. And so I was like a hired girl on the ranches, and so, the first one I worked on didn't have running water or electricity, so I was kind of used to roughing it. But I have to say, I didn't feel like I fit in because I would, like when I was 6, the book starts when I was 6 years old, and I was curious about why the water was rushing and flooding over the planks that went across a ditch on the way to school. And I couldn't figure out where all the water came from, and then it would suddenly disappear. So one spring day, I went and followed the streams and was astounded when I got to the top that it wasn't rushing waters. It was a lot of little streams from melting snow. And I think from then on, I was just interested. And also, I read a lot because I was in a small town. My mother, some summers, she would ask the school to open up the library to us, and I think I read every book in the library. I mean, I was an avid reader, and I wrote when I was young, too. So that way I could travel to whatever country I wanted to. I mean, I traveled all over the place in books, and I mentioned some of them, in my memoir. So it was kind of a protected life, and then we would have, my parents were very Catholic, and so they had seminarians come during the summer and teach us things, and so I always thought I would be a nun because the priest would hold up a rosary and say, who wants to enter the religious life, and I wanted the rosary, so I'd raise my hand.
Yeah, Lisa.
But I followed all the
rules.
Lisa I wanted to be a nun too. When we lived in Kenya, I wanted to be a nun because Nancy taught the nuns in Nairobi, the Carmelite sisters, and then I was a little kid and they were teaching me things, and I went to after getting kicked out of one school, I got as a little kid. It was like, it's a long story, but I wanted to become a nun, and that didn't last very long. I also wanted to become a maid. But anyway, that didn't last very long. But this is interesting, going from that kind of background and then all of a sudden traveling the world. What were your parents? Were they worried about what you were doing?
Yes, my parents, my father liked to travel, and there were summers. I'm writing the sequel to this book, and in it I'm recounting many trips that my sons and I have 2 boys, took with my father. My mother didn't like camping, or my father had a 5th-wheeler. She says it was just another house to keep clean, and she was a fastidious house cleaner. I am not, and my mother, she was always behind me. If whatever I did, she would help support me, but she could not understand why I needed to go off and have adventures and see the world. It just, it wasn't something that she really liked to do. So,
Yeah.
well, and then I was eventually the oldest of 6. So I think they were more, I don't know. My parents have passed away now, so I can't ask them, but I suspect that besides my mother not understanding me, they wanted their kids to be protected, like all parents, and they never knew what I was doing or where I was going. In fact, my mother said that she worried about me getting lost in Tijuana, and that's exactly what happened. I got very lost the first time I crossed the border into Tijuana, just because you have to read about it in the book, but it was quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But things picked up from then, and so I've been back to Mexico several times, and my brother is a professor at the University of Veracruz in Jalapa, and has lived there for 20 some years or something like that. So I still have a connection with Mexico. But if you
go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like you were young when you were in other countries, right, Lisa?
Well, I was young. Nancy raised me in different countries. We left the States when I was a year and a half, and so we lived in Kenya, England, South Africa, America, then Mexico, then back here, and we can't stop traveling. And it is this, interesting roller coaster that you get addicted to. But it's, I think number one, I really appreciate your writing. I haven't finished the memoir yet because I don't want to tell everybody everything in there, but really appreciate your writing. But I love the fact that you're just so open to other cultures. And I think even now, in this day and age, it's like, I know we're on way back when history show, but this is kind of modern history, right? But and yet when you think about Peru and you think about Mexico, ancient history that we have in those countries, but the cultures have maintained. I know it's changing up a bit now because of what's happened with the Western world taking over the rest of the planet, and different countries wanting it. Like when we left Mexico, Walmart's moving in, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, and
don't do it.
Wanted it. They wanted it there, so that's with their choice. But there's this culture that is just so friendly and down to earth, and quality seems like quality of life and time with family. It's just so I think I feel it's so important that people do read your book if they haven't been into these kind of cultures, and understand that many of these cultures are here in our country right now. So it's really
absolutely
start here.
Yeah.
I often get asked, do I have culture shock? And I have to say, when I go to another country, I do not necessarily I can't remember having culture shock. But when I come back, I have culture shock.
Yes, that's
because, and the first time I came back from Mexico, I had just been where the people that sold you the bus tickets would smile, and they would help you out, and the bus tickets were a lot cheaper. And the buses weren't on time, but the first time we went down, the bus waited for, I can't remember how many, 9 hours, I think, for the group of 13 of us to find. No, it wasn't that long. It was many, many hours. We were supposed to catch it at 1:30, and we didn't leave until about 5:30. And a lot of it was because we 13 girls were not there yet. No, there were 9 of us at that point. But anyway. So they would hold the bus. Now, can you imagine a bus being held that many hours
not in
for
this
anybody?
country.
And And I'm sure if you've ridden on buses in a lot of third world, well, any country, well, no, third world countries, I think, maybe Latin countries, where they sing, they share their food, you know, that. And so as soon as I came back from the States, I was just, you know, sour grapes, clerks that waited on you and directed you here. But there were signs, there were paved roads. You knew, you know, things were set up so much more orderly. And I said to myself, I said, why can't you have it both ways, where you could feel welcome and have everything super organized? And the other thing is our values. We value here, you know, climbing the ladder and material things, I think, a lot more than in some of those countries. And I mean, you've got to have enough to live on. I mean, it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma. I have not found where you can, you know, have a whole community that is just one way or that has a blend. I'm sure they exist, but I haven't found one to live in.
Well, see, the thing is, I rode the bus once in Kenya, and everybody around me was like, no, don't do it, don't do it. I'm like, I'm doing it. And so you get on the bus, and you pay your money, you get on the bus, and then a lady sits next to me, and she puts a chicken on my lap, a live one, not a dead one, and here comes a bag of cabbages. And so you kind of like, as an American, you're like, whoa, but now I like animals, so I'm like, this is really fun. And, you know, so this is cool. I got a chicken on my lap. But they will wait for people. And if you're going to wait for people, then you cannot be on time for your next stop. And so when they go to, as each stop went, we got later and later and later. So a 45-minute trip took 5 hours. And and by the time you get off, you got chickens, you got goats, you got cabbages. I thought it was awesome. But now if you had to do it every day to get to work, it could get a little bit old.
Well, see, and you are very efficient. On time. We're more efficient than some other places. I mean, it's important that they sneak rides, you know, even though it's not a regular stop. A lot of things like. And in some ways, the town I grew up in, Ismay, it's called, in Montana. It was like a Wild West town, and it was kind of like that. I think I grew up among people that looked out for us. We didn't lock our doors, things like that. But they also knew everything that was going on and had judgments about what was going on and who wasn't living up to the church rules and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, that goes on in every place, but I think they're looser about rules and regulations in some countries. So anyway.
Well, when you talk about culture shock, I you know, it's when we came back from South Africa and we went to England for a little in the Channel Islands for a little bit, but then we came here and we went into a grocery store and we didn't understand why there were so many different varieties of things, and we loaded up the cart. We didn't know what we were doing, and we walked away. We just left it because we couldn't. That was our culture shock, was how, like, going into a mall and everything is supersized. I remember my aunt going, here, you've got to have you don't just have a root beer, and I'd never had a root beer, have a giant root beer. And I'm like, why do I want a giant root beer? So that was a culture shock to me, was definitely this country, but all the other places, no. And it is interesting. And it's interesting traveling this country and the way we travel. We are pretty much like slow travelers, that some places do give us culture shock. The back east, after being in the Southwest for so long, has definitely been different.
That's a eye opener.
It's and the history is, you know, deep if you're thinking about, you know, white people's history versus Native American history, you know. But it's interesting. So Peru, being over there, I mean, how could you not get so swept away with that kind of setting? Like,
Well, keep in mind, I was 21 when I went, and I don't know that I appreciated. I mean, I was bowled over by the walls, the Inca walls, and how they put them together without mortar, and the history. I mean, I learned a lot while I was there. But one year we went back, and my mother-in-law took me to some other rooms around Cusco, and I looked at it and I said, did they just put these here? Because I had not seen them before. I had not seen them before, or I had seen them and not appreciated them enough. So as I get older, I look back and I really value all the things that I was exposed to and that I saw. And I think it's getting harder to travel. Well, of course, now during the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, so many more people are traveling abroad. So it's much more crowded, and there's so much more pollution, both in the air and on the ground. I mean, you were in Africa, but I remember being in Africa and looking outside the bus and thinking, that can't be snow on the ground, and it was a field full of plastic bags. So that's one of the dismaying things about some of the travel. I mean, most of it is, and then I've been to pristine places like Bhutan and high up in the mountains. I love the mountains. Mountains fascinate me. But in fact, that's one reason I think I started traveling is the year before we moved to California, we took a trip out to where my father had relatives in Seattle and Portland, and then we came down to the Bay Area where my father's brother lived. And when crossing the mountains, it was the first time I'd seen mountains. And when we got to the ocean, it was the first time I had seen the ocean. And I went back home, and my parents were very worried about taking me out of school for my final year of high school. They just thought, senior year in a new school. And I went from a school of, I think, 28 students to 400 or 600. I can't remember. It was hundreds of students.
Yeah.
So it was a big change. But I was ready to go because my quarter of the world was too small for me. So like you said, once you start traveling, you don't want to stop. And so too bad about the pandemic because we've had to stop.
The things you learn in school, especially if you talk about history, you get the dates and this happened then and so did this. And you try to memorize it so you can pass a test. But it doesn't actually filter, at least not for me, until like you experience something. Doesn't even have to be the same country, but you experience something historic, like visiting a historic battlefield or ruins, or where you get the idea. You can see it, you can feel it, you're right there, you can imagine it. Then it starts to be real. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words on a page. So, to me, that is the value of travel is being there in something that will now stick with you because you were there,
Yes, and making the connections, you're right, between the history. And, of course, in Europe, there's so much more history that they've preserved. Yeah. I'll never forget, I took my two sons to Europe for 2 months, which was a couple of weeks too long. I don't know how you and Lisa did it, but with my two boys, one was 13, just turned 14 when we were in Italy, and the other one was 17, ready to go into college, I guess. And the 17-year-old walked into the Uffizi. No, it was into the at the Vatican. The Vatican Museum, and he looks at the 4 stone images that are outside of that. They're paintings. I wish I knew the name now. And he says, "Oh, Mom, that was on the cover of my social studies." So, they know more about the world. The world seems more real to them. So,
of course. You can relate to something,
Well, that's how I got. When we were on the road in South Africa, Nancy we went on the road for 2.5 years with her because she's a wildlife artist in her art and everything. And she homeschooled me, but I like to say I was truly a road scholar because what we did, I learned on the road. My history wasn't doing as well because it was just kind of, it wasn't coming to life in class for me. Yet I wasn't, ignorant about history because at 11 years old, I'd read all the main historical novels you can imagine. And then when we get out on the road, to this day, I always talk about Ishlawanda Rock, and the Shaka Zulu history, and then being able to understand a battlefield and getting those chills and bumps. Like I'd been to them as a younger child, but it was when I was, in my early teens that I really started to understand people died here. And this is how the battle happened, and battle strategy, and the sacrifices people have made over the years for what they truly believed in, whether you agree with it or not. It's even
Doesn't
now,
matter.
like look at North and South, we've been doing a lot of Civil War history lately here. And at the end of the day, it's people really sacrificed. And I feel like we have to go to these places so that we understand, so we don't repeat the same mistakes, but also understand what truly giving your all. And I feel like travel demands that of you. Don't you feel that? Like travel demands that you can't be half-assed.
No, you can't.
Get up and get that
and
train.
not only that, you learn who you are by traveling because you have to live by your wits and figure things out. And if you're with a different language, you've got to try and navigate your way through that. So it tests you in many ways, and I think it gives you more confidence. To take on whatever you want to take on.
Sure. You went as a young woman, and I know Nancy, the same background, and in going off on her own to the wilds of Africa, and then here I am as a little kid, but she started traveling real young too, and it's, I think, especially in the eras where you both started traveling, almost similar times, was not really heard of for young girls to go off and go to these kinds of countries. And people look at you like, why are you doing that? I mean, even when we went from England to South Africa, the president or the principal or whatever he's called of the school got me up on stage in England, and I had to say, why on earth would my parents take me to Africa? Why on earth? And I'm like, that's the sunshine. No, I left England, but so it was like this weird, like people still like, why are you going to these, jungles?
He wrote on her report card, it's a case of swings and roundabouts. I'm like, get to the point. What are you talking about? Like, looking at what's on the report card, it's a case of swings and roundabouts as to whether a young child should travel. And I'm like, what?
Yes. But
swings and roundabouts. I mean, back and forth, around and round. What? I don't get the point. I didn't get the point.
One year, many years ago, I was given a Fulbright scholarship. I wasn't able to follow up on it, but in planning for it, I went to my son's high school. And he was a sophomore then and wanted to take him out of school for a year. And the principal said, oh, no, he'll lose out too much. And he went down all the reasons why he would lose out. Yeah. And I knew very well he would learn a new language. He would be immersed in the culture, because there's nothing to being immersed in the culture, I don't think. And you were talking about people that look at you, even in the other countries. We would get asked, I was with a roommate, another female roommate my age, and we would get asked all the time, don't you miss your family? Well, how can you be away from your family? They couldn't understand how two single girls could just uproot themselves and go live in their community and be away from their family. So, no, there are a lot of people in the world that don't want to take risks and don't, and so I don't think they gain from it. They gain maybe stability or something more, but that's one of my philosophies is, take risks. It's too short.
Yeah, I love the beginning of your memoir, and everyone again, it's called Between-Inca-Walls. You talk about Montana. It's like you're getting out of school. You're planning your horse and then a husband in that order. I cracked that. I would like that, but not the husband part. But when I was graduating, a lot of my friends were, to this day, I have friends from high school that are like, you need a man, and I no, I don't. There was always, you need a man, and I that saying just it. I'm not against men, and I've had a good time, but in my life, but there was this thing. It's like you're supposed to get out of school, go to college, or be pregnant and married, and I wasn't going to do that.
Well, and in college, it used to be you went for your MRS degree. Now, that was not me. That's not why I went to college. And right after college is when I went into the Peace Corps. But my sequel, I'm writing a sequel to this first book because people want to know what happened. And it shows more of the contrast between the U.S. and Peru, because we would go back to Peru and my husband would become the guy that I married, and then we'd come back to California, and he would have to be job hunting and working hard, and I was working hard. And you can see the difference between the two cultures. Now, we spent most of our time in this culture, and I asked him the other day, I said, do you think that was the right decision? And for the education of our kids and our, economic well-being, he thinks it was. But emotionally, you sacrifice something sometimes by, not being able to combine the two cultures. Not everybody, but, we. So, the second one will point out how women of the 60s, I continue to be quite unusual even after I married and had children. And so that's the emphasis. And the models that I had, I went to all women's Catholic college, and the nuns taught then. There aren't too many of them left anymore that teach, but they were PhD women. They were models that, said to me, you can. In fact, one of them, my sociology teacher, expected us to go to graduate school, and so I went all the way up and got a doctorate.
Awesome.
And so now, as I look back, I'm thinking, okay, so why did I do that? Well, partly I like challenges, and partly I worked in education, and your salary goes up the more units that you have, and the more degrees you have. But I also like learning, and I majored in multicultural education. Guess why? I like learning about other cultures and education.
Yeah, and it's so important to learn about other cultures instead of this, let's build a wall, let's do this, let's keep everybody separate. So the more you're separate, the more, well, first of all, it's a sign of gross insecurity, that you have to be separate. And, I found there's good and bad experiences in life, no matter what. That's the name of the game. I found in travel,
we have so much.
That travel is the educator and puts you in a different mind frame. It gets you out of that protective, has to be my way frame of mind, and that a difference is good.
And we learn from each other.
Yeah,
there's so much to learn from every group. There's not a superior group or an inferior group. We just have our own ways that we've adapted to doing things. And
I think memoirs are a really good way to educate too. I know you're an educator, and I think personal stories are one of the quickest ways for people to feel an experience. So, like right now, if we can't travel overseas, we can read your book and travel, and also learn about. It's the coming of age, not your novel, your memoir. It's a coming of age story, and it reminds us, like, hey, why did we do this? Like you're just saying, why did I do that? It's always interesting to figure those things out. So it must have been fun writing a memoir, and kind of going back and putting words on paper. I mean, did you journal before, like to remember everything? How did you keep track?
Like I said, I when I was very young, I would make up stories and write them down, and my parents got a kick out of it. So I think that encouraged me. And then I got diaries for Christmas or something, and kept diaries in high school. Mostly it's what this pair of shoes cost and what that dress cost. Not really substantial things, but that's interest. The prices of things were when I was a teenager. But writing a memoir, especially if it's about traumatic things, can give you a stronger immune system, and you sleep better, and improves your mental health. It's been proven. There's been research on how beneficial it is physically to go through this. Now, some memoirs must be very painful to write, because people have had such traumatic experiences, and mine was towards the end, and I didn't realize how traumatic it was, but I had written it down, so I could relive it. But just letting go of guilt and trauma, and when you write it down, you let go of that. It's just like a burden lifting off your shoulders. And that it's the end part that is what my very religious mother would have been ashamed of. It so happens that my husband, was very accepted eventually with my family, and they really did like him. But, they were skeptical in the beginning when I brought him home. He didn't speak English. He didn't have a way to earn money. He, and he left everything that he had ever known for me.
Wow.
And,
that's huge.
And we've been married 55 years almost.
Wow,
next
awesome.
June will be 55 years.
Awesome.
So it's lasted.
Awesome.
And even writing the memoir, I had to change his name in the memoir. He is a very private person. And I thought I was writing the memoir for my two sons, and they are not that interested in it. But I've gotten really surprising feedback at, better than I think what my, sons might have given me. First of all, my youngest son cannot read the book with another man's name, as in it.
But
that's what happens when you write.
Things change with time, and attitudes do change with time, and it's called growing up, and it's called education, and that comes in drips and drabs. So
it does.
What happens right now is not what might be the case 6 months from now, or a year from now, or a couple years from now. It's about
I figure
experience that will change your attitudes.
Well, now you two are fortunate. That's why I was saying mother and daughter team is just really, I admire that because I can't see. I mean, I excuse my sons for not being that interested in it because I think, okay, when I was their age, one is 49 and the other one is 53, would I have been that interested in my parents' courtship? I probably would have, but I probably wouldn't have had much time to read it because I was into my own, stuff, my own occupation. I wasn't retired yet. So eventually they might be interested in it. We'll see.
Yeah, everybody has their time of when and also wishing they had. You know what I mean? We all have those moments like, I should have made time for this, and it comes and I think family history is so neat to learn. I mean, and especially if it's a blended cultures, that's so cool. I mean, that's like creating a whole new recipe. Like it's cool. I think. That's
yes.
And it's you get better food that way. I mean, it's just this is a whole cool thing. But I do want to ask, and last question, because now we're going to go to England. But I wanted to ask, because it's one of our favorite questions on our Way Back When history show is, if you could get in a time machine and go anywhere, forward, backwards, where would you get out? And like what time frame would you get out?
Oh, I think I'd probably go back to those innocent years of, 21 to 22 and 23, falling in love. But I can do that, see. I do that. I reread my book to perfect it, officially 22 times. We did 22 different iterations of it. And each time you relive it. That's why I say the people who write about traumatic events, I really give them credit because they have to relive that every time they reread it. And in order to make it readable, you really have to do a lot of work. I was used to writing doctoral dissertations and, academic articles, and people aren't going to read that if I write a memoir that way. So I forgot what your question was, but
no, I was going to say, getting in a time machine. You want to go back to being footloose and in your 20s.
Just the first blush, being exposed to all these things for the first time. Not that I'm jaundiced now, but the world is so much more crowded and jaundiced itself, just in terms of, even the people are more skeptical. They're more, and with the social media, you don't know sometimes who you can trust and who you can't. So that innocent time of the early 60s, idealistic. We were so idealistic to think that we could, liberal arts majors could go to other countries and do something worthwhile. And really, we were the ones that were changed, and we were changed.
I think it's really. I think you, Nancy, both, you really were in a lucky time period of being able to do it because you were also trailblazers and being, very few women doing, getting out there and exploring the world. But, even on the animal side, Nancy was able to experience the biodiversity of wildlife in Africa that, and I was too as a kid, that you're not going to see now unless we really do some changes. So I think we're, really, and that's the beauty of your memoir. Again, just so well written. I'm like, I got to do a show, but I got to read more. So it's awesome. I can't wait for part 2, and I'm not done with, the first one. And I hope you're going to do book clubs because I think there's so many conversations that can come
That's a
from
good
your
idea.
memoir. I think
I'm happy to do book clubs.
Awesome. I mean,
Good
hey,
idea.
Zoom book clubs forever now. We're just all Zoom around, the planet. That's how we travel now. But again, everyone, the book is by Evelyn-LaTorre, LaTorre. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Because I could go Dutch on you.
Unless you want to roll the R's. If you want to roll the R's, it's
LaTorre.
LaTorre. I'm sure you know how to do that.
LaTorre. Oh, that's fun.
The book sounds like a song.
I know. Between-Inca-Walls, a Peace Corps memory, and a memoir, and go get it on Amazon. Everything right now is through She Writes Press, but also ask your independent bookstores to get it in for you in your libraries too. Evelyn, we're going to play a song for you. This is from guitarist Jim Stubblefield. He's down in Central California in the coast area, and I love your work in the Central Valley, by the way. Cesar Chavez and what he's done is incredible. So here it is. It's called Machu Picchu. So this is your song for the day. Here it is. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You take care.
You're welcome. You too. Happy travels.
Thank you.